ingbreaking.com. Lesson 12. Vacation to Canada. Present tense. Questions and answers. George asks Kyra what the date is. What question does George ask Kyra? George asks Kyra what the date is. He asks Kyra what the date is. Does George ask Kyra what time it is? No, George doesn't ask Kyra what time it is. George asks Kyra what the date is. Does George ask Kyra her name? No, George doesn't ask Kyra her name. George asks Kyra what the date is. Kyra answers, it's November 16. What does Kyra answer? Kyra answers, it's November 16. She answers, it's November 16. Does Kyra say it's November 15? No, Kyra doesn't say it's November 15. Kyra answered it's November 16. Does Kyra answer it's November 16? Yes, Kyra answers it's November 16. She answers it's November 16. George asks Kyra when she has a vacation. What does George ask Kyra? George asks Kyra when she has a vacation. He asks Kyra when she has a vacation. What does George want to know? George wants to know when Kyra has a vacation. George asks Kyra when she has a vacation. Does George ask Kyra where she lives? No. George doesn't ask Kyra where she lives. George asks Kyra when she has a vacation. Kyra says she splits the next Friday. When does Kyra go on vacation? The next Friday. Kyra says she splits the next Friday. She says she splits the next Friday. Does Kyra say she splits the next Monday? No, Kyra doesn't say she leaves next Monday. Kyra says she splits the next Friday. Does Kyra go to school the next Friday? No, Kyra doesn't go to school the next Friday. Kyra says she has a vacation the next Friday. George says that is very soon. What does George say? George says that is very soon. He says that is very soon. He says the next Friday is very soon. Does George say this is not very soon? No, George doesn't say that isn't very soon. George says that is very soon. Does George think this is very soon? Yes, George thinks the next Friday is very soon. George says that is very soon. George asks Kyra how long she stays in Canada. What does George ask Kyra? George asks Kyra how long she stays in Canada. He asks Kyra how long she stays in Canada. Does George ask Kyra how long she stays in Canada? Yes, George asks Kyra how long she stays in Canada. What does George want to know about Kyra? George wants to know how long Kyra stays in Canada. George asks Kyra how long she stays in Canada. Kyra says she stays about 2 weeks in Canada. How long does Kyra say she stays in Canada? About 2 weeks. Kyra says she stays about 2 weeks in Canada. When does Kyra return from Canada? Kyra returns from Canada in about 2 weeks. Kyra says she stays about 2 weeks in Canada. Does Kyra stay about 1 month in Canada? No, Kyra doesn't stay about 1 month in Canada. Kyra says she stays about 2 weeks in Canada. George asks Kyra when she comes back. Does Mike ask Kyra when she comes back? No. Mike doesn't ask Kyra when she comes back. George asks Kyra when she comes back. What does George ask Kyra? George asks Kyra when she comes back. He asks Kyra when she comes back. Does George ask Kyra when she gets married? No, George doesn't ask Kyra when she gets married. George asks Kyra when she comes back. Kyra says she is coming back on the 30th. When does Kyra say she is coming back? On the 30th. Kyra says she is coming back on the 30th. She says she is coming back on the 30th. Does Kyra say she is coming back on the 28th? No, Kyra doesn't say she is coming back on the 28th. Kyra says she is coming back on the 30th. What is she doing on the 30th? She is coming back on the 30th. Kyra says she is coming back on the 30th. She says she is coming back on the 30th. George is happy for Kyra and tells her to have a nice trip. What does George tell Kyra? He tells her to have a nice trip. George is happy for Kyra and tells her to have a nice trip. Does George wish Kyra a safe flight? No, George doesn't wish Kyra a safe flight. George is happy for Kyra and tells her to have a nice trip. Does George wish Kyra a nice trip? Yes, George wishes Kyra a nice trip. George is happy for Kyra and tells her to have a nice trip.